With Pokémon Legends ZA just a week away, the 9th generation of Pokémon is swiftly coming to a close. It's hard to believe it, but in just 4 months we'll be getting our first look at whatever Generation 10 has in store for us. So I thought this was the perfect time to take one last look back at Paldea, my favorite Pokémon region. But to explain why I love Paldea so much, we have to go back to 2019. Pokémon Sword and Shield were the first games in the Pokémon franchise to experiment with open area level design when they introduced the Wild Area. The Wild Area was a large plain filled with a variety of strong and weak Pokémon roaming around. On a first playthrough, the Wild Area is really exciting. A good number of the game's 400 Pokémon can be found there, and the spawns change depending on daily weather conditions. At this point in the franchise, there wasn't really anything like this, so it was actually a lot of fun just to see what Pokémon you'd run into. However, on repeat playthroughs, I find myself running through the Wild Area just making a beeline to the next town. I might seek out a specific Pokémon, but otherwise I don't spend much time there. There's a major reason for this. The Wild Area just isn't that interesting. When the newness wears off, it's a very flat and somewhat uninspired area. There aren't many secrets to uncover. The second portion of the map has some hills, rocky overhangs, and arches to run under, so it at least gains some visual variety, but after first playthrough it just isn't really that fun to go through it again. The DLC added 2 more wild areas, the Isle of Armor and Crown Tundra. These are massive steps up in level design. They introduce 2 things sorely lacking in the base game's wild area, variety and verticality. The maps now have much more to them. They feature different biomes with unique plants and flowers to add detail and color. They have caves that wind and branch off to link different areas together. They have more visible landmarks that encourage the player to explore. There's secrets to find, like the Alolan Diglett in the Isle of Armor that unlock rare Alolan gift Pokemon, or the legendary footprints in the Crown Tundra that allow you to encounter the Swords of Justice. The Crown Tundra even adds an encounter with the Galarian birds, which involves having to go back and search all 3 wild areas to physically chase the Pokemon down. These changes to the level design are massive. They give the world a sense of liveliness. They encourage the player to engage with the level, to seek out every corner that might be hiding a secret. The DLC is where we see Game Freak start to get more comfortable with what it really means to have a 3D world. Pokemon games have been 3D since 2013 with the release of Pokemon X and Y. But I'd argue that the design of the games hadn't taken much advantage of that fact until 2020. The improved camera angles allow for beautiful visuals in these games, but X, Y, Sun and Moon, and Sword and Shield all primarily use an overhead camera with relatively flat root design. You could do most of these maps in a 2D Pokemon game with little issue. Isle of Armor and Crown Tundra feel like a specific effort to take the franchise in a new direction by introducing vertical level design that sets itself apart from anything the series had done before. Most notably in the caves, which straight up could not be done from a top-down perspective. It was about 18 hours deep in my Crown Tundra DLC playthrough when I realized what I'd been playing all day. I was standing at the peak of the Crown Tundra, looking through a gap in the rock that let me peer all the way down to Dynatree Hill, when I realized that this was the future of Pokemon. I knew then that this was a turning point for the series, that we were never going back to the old style of level design. Pokemon had adopted the "if you can see it, you can go there" philosophy from larger games like Skyrim and Breath of the Wild, and it was only going to get bigger from there. The following game immediately proved me right. Pokémon Legends Arceus was a completely different style of Pokemon game. It was focused heavily on exploration. The joy of the game was in seeking out the Pokemon that inhabited every corner of the map. The level design built upon the basic philosophy established by the DLC maps, providing maps with varied visual environments that utilized verticality to build up instead of just out, and providing visual landmarks in the distance that encourage players to investigate. Beyond that, story progression unlocked new ways of interacting with the world. By the end of the game, you were able to dash, climb, and glide across just about every surface you could see. This unlockable interactivity is a twofold gameplay feature that not only naturally gates progression in lieu of past games' HM system, but also inspires deeper exploration of the level. Once Sneasler's climbing ability is unlocked in the 4th map, players are able to return to the first 3 maps and find Pokemon and items they couldn't previously access. It's engaging. The limits of your discovery are decided by what you physically are able to reach. There have been times in the past where player movement inspired level design elements. The Acro and Mach bikes in Ruby, Sapphire, and Emerald opened different paths in some routes, and X and Y's roller skates had some rails that you were able to grind on. But this is the first game where the entire level feels based around player movement, and it feels amazing to swap between mounts to quickly soar across the level or unlock a previously inaccessible area to find a rampaging alpha Pokemon. In a short period of time, the level design of these games had taken leaps and bounds in the 3D space. But I knew it could still be pushed further. Legends Arceus' maps are great, and they work well for the game's mission structure. But for the 9th generation of games, I wanted them to weave these kinds of maps together into one seamless world. Luckily for me, that's exactly what they did. Paldea gets a bad rap from a lot of fans, but I don't think that entirely has to do with level design. The game chugged like hell on the original Switch. Textures had to be downgraded and foliage had to be reduced just to get the game running in a dubiously stable state. You can see the difference between the number of trees in the first trailer and the final game, and that was probably already after quite a bit of revision. Scarlet and Violet also have a very polarizing art style. I think most people could agree that Pokemon look fantastic, but the characters and world get a lot more mixed reception. The visuals lean a lot more realistic than cel-shaded cartoon, so the low-quality textures mixed with the unpopular stylization means a lot of people find the world to look kinda ugly and bland. Now, I'm actually a fan of Gen 9's unique art style for the most part, but even I think it could stand to look a bit better, especially when placed side by side with its contemporaries. Additionally, most of the buildings can't be entered. This kinda sucks. There is evidence that Game Freak was working on more building interiors, but for whatever reason, likely tight deadlines, they didn't make it into the final game. So, I get it. This looks like a freaking PS2 game. How could you possibly say it's better than the much more polished looking 2D titles? Well, because despite the performance, despite the visuals, I absolutely loved Paldea. Paldea feels to me like the full realization of the Pokemon idea. You're dropped into a world teeming with creatures, and you're set free to discover them in every nook and cranny of the map. Once you complete the tutorial, you're allowed full access to everything this region has to offer. And what does it have to offer? What is there to see and do? In my eyes, a lot. Paldea takes everything that worked before in region design and builds upon it. It's the most fun and interesting world that Pokemon has made to date. Paldea is divided into 5 major areas, a province for each of the cardinal directions, and Area 0, a mysterious landmass that sits deep in the central crater that Paldea revolves around. Scarlet and Violet don't have a set order in which you have to accomplish goals. Unfortunately, the levels of story battles don't scale, so there is a preferred order to do things, but you can still choose to go anywhere whenever you want. And to help you better explore Paldea, the game gives you the legendary Pokemon Koraidon or Miraidon. These legendaries are all of the Legends Arceus mounts rolled into one. Through completion of the Path of Legends storyline, you'll gain the ability to leap, climb, swim, and glide across Paldea. A lot of the late game areas are actually visible from the very start of the game, and are only limited by your ability to get to them. Previous Pokemon games all had a set path that the player must travel on. The regions were designed around being experienced going from point A to point B to point C. Plenty of these games have branching paths and optional areas, but the main progression will look the same for every player. Since Paldea can be freely tackled from any angle, it means that the map has to be designed differently than past regions. Every point of interest can be accessed in multiple ways. What this means is even if you replay the story beats in the exact same order on a repeat playthrough, the path you take, Pokemon you encounter, and trainers you fight could end up being totally different. Take Alfornada Gym, for example. Alfornada sits in South Province Area 6, at the bottom left corner of the map. You can approach it from multiple angles. The way that most people take is likely the clearest path from West Province Area 1. You follow the main road to Alfornada Cavern, where a sign warns that you won't be able to make it on foot. If you've defeated Titan Orthworm, you can easily jump through the cave to reach Alfornada. On this path, you'll encounter Pokemon like Skiddo, Mudbray, Rockruff, and Capsakid. But maybe you take the tunnel from South Province Area 2 instead, and take this land bridge along the coast. On the way, you encounter Maskiff, Murkrow, Toxel, Finizen, Wingull, and Wattrel. It leads most of the way through the cave to an area where you can either jump the rest of the way, or continue up a ramp, completely negating the need to beat Orthworm. The trek up Glaciado Mountain is another great example of this new style of region design. Let's say you're trying to take on Grush's gym. If you start at Medali, you'll find an immediate branch path. If you take the right path, you'll take Dali Zappa Passage, the cave that links Medali and Zappa Pico. I really love the visual here of a Pokemon Center in the middle of a cave. It's probably my favorite Pokemon Center in the series. This cave is full of popular pseudo-legendary Pokemon, including Frigibax, the Scarlet exclusive Larvitar and Dino, and the Violet exclusive Bagon. You can take this cave most of the way up the mountain, and it's only a short stretch from here to the gym. The left path takes you on a winding trail up the side of the mountain. You'll encounter Pokemon like Oinkologne, Mastiff, Sawsbuck, and Citadel, and face plenty of trainers on your way. You'll wind all the way around the mountain, swing through Montenevera, and take the path to Glaciato Gym. Of course, that's assuming you're taking a set path and aren't just jumping around the mountain as most players likely do. Beyond the large-scale map details, there are a lot of smaller things to find as well. There are tiny caves and tunnels all over the map that hold items and Terra Pokemon. And there are the 10 Wonders of Paldea to seek out, which are not only interesting viewpoints, but also unlock additional fast travel points, so you can traverse the map even easier. My favorite is Colonnade Hollow, this cool kind of rocky overhang cave where Terra Garchomp and Knacklestack spawn. Every time I've replayed this game, I've taken a different path. I feel like I'm always discovering something new. That level of freedom means no matter how many hundreds of hours I've poured into Paldea, it still feels infinitely enjoyable to hop back in and explore it all over again. Exploration isn't just for fun though. Searching all these areas nets 3 kinds of treasures: rare Pokemon, items, and collectible stakes. Because all Pokemon now spawn in the overworld, Pokemon can have very specific spawn points. Rare Pokemon are no longer just 5 or 1% encounters, but often have to be sought out in more remote areas of the map. Charcadet is a great example of this. Armarouge and Ceruledge were really popular in pre-release promo, and their pre-evolution Charcadet is a rare Pokemon that can be found early on if you just know where to look. If you stick to the main path, you'll likely walk right past it, but if you go off the beaten path and wind around the rocky maze of South Province Area 3, you'll find some dead ends that actually have a Charcadet waiting for you. Roaring Moon is another great example. It's one of the most popular of Paldea's Paradox Pokemon. You can't just find it out and about though. If you want one, you have to find one in a cave hidden behind some large rocks in Area 0. If you don't actively explore, you will never encounter this Pokemon through normal gameplay. Or at least you couldn't on the Switch 1 version. I think the Switch 2 version spawns a frankly ludicrous amount of Pokemon, so they might occasionally appear in the lower stretch of Area 0, but the most intentional way of finding this Pokemon is still in that hidden cave. Additionally, shiny Pokemon appear in the overworld like in Let's Go or Legends Arceus. Because you're encountering such a large number of Pokemon on your journey, you're incredibly likely to run into a shiny Pokemon. The more Pokemon you see on your travels, the better your odds get. I've a lot of friends who hadn't found shinies in a lifetime of playing Pokemon games, who found their first random shiny in these games. The entire world is covered in items. The Pokemon Gimmighoul, which hides in chests atop lookout points and can only be caught by exploration of the map, can only be evolved by collecting 999 Gimmighoul coins. These coins are scattered all over Paldea and can be collected really easily if you're actively searching every ruin, tunnel, under every sign, or any other notable landmark. TMs, battle items, and rare treasures that can be sold for a lot of money also shimmer across the landscape. As long as you're constantly searching, you'll pretty much never run out of money in this game. The ominous stakes are similar to the footprints from the Crown Tundra DLC. There are 32 of them in total, divided into 4 colors: purple, green, yellow, and blue. Gathering all stakes of one color will unlock a corresponding legendary battle in the overworld. These are the Chinese-inspired Treasures of Ruin, and they're only obtainable by careful combing of the land. I spent the first half of this video examining the steps we took to get to Paldea because I truly think this region is a culmination of everything that came before it. As a lifelong Pokemon fan, I can see the ways that Game Freak have iterated on their design with each new entry. I know for many the game is ugly. I know the towns can be disappointing. The presentation definitely took a bit of a hit this generation, but I still love the way this world looks, the way it feels. You can't enter a lot of houses, but the towns are still unique and visually striking. I love the foodie culture of Medali, the Portugal-inspired tiles of Alfornada. I love the portside market town of Porto Marinada, the designer shopping in Levincia, and the cascading waterfalls of Cascarafa. I love Paldea. I love how fluid it is to move around. I love scouring every surface, knowing that there's always something to find around every single corner. Pokemon was always this fantasy about traveling the world with magical creatures, and this game makes the world feel more grand and alive than ever. If it had a little more time in the oven to come out more polished, I think a lot more people would share that opinion. I I can only hope that with more development time and more powerful hardware that Gen 10 looks just as stunning as Gen 9 deserved. Why does it feel like I'm forgetting something? Wait, I didn't talk about... No one else is doing it like this. The first time I went to Area Zero, I was floored. I couldn't believe what I was playing. The story had built up to this, the entire world was shaped around whatever was sitting in this crater, and somehow it didn't disappoint. Area Zero feels otherworldly. It's deep underground, but massive pillars of light cascade through the fog overhead and bathe the world in light. It's so bright here, it almost seems to glow. The entire area is shaped like a funnel, so you just keep going deeper and deeper towards whatever awaits you at the bottom. Even the deepest areas that sunlight can't touch glisten with magic terra crystals. The heart of Paldea shimmers in a rainbow light. Cave dwellers and living flowers coexist with bizarre Pokémon from out of time. It's beautiful, mysterious, and eerie, and the entire time, the best song in the game scores your journey. Area Zero is special. There's not much about it that I can say that you, if you've played Scarlet or Violet, won't already understand. It's a one-of-a-kind thing that can only be fully understood by experiencing it yourself, alongside the fantastic characters from the story. I can't be in this place without thinking about the ending to the game, and the emotions it made me feel. It's the cherry on top of an already fantastic world, the Xanarkin to this game's Spira. While the future of the franchise is incredibly bright, and Game Freak's only going to get better and better at open-world game design over time, I do wonder if they'll ever be able to wow me like this again. I think no matter how many amazing adventures there are still to come, there will always be a tiny part of me still here in Area Zero. I love this region and its games deeply, and I don't know if I'll ever be able to fully express what they mean to me. For those of you that feel the same, I hope I did Paldea justice with this video. I really enjoyed looking back at it all, so I'm open to looking at other regions in a similar way if that's something you guys would be into. It'd mean a lot to me if you enjoyed this video that you like and subscribe if you're interested in more content like this. I have a lot planned with ZA coming up, so you're going to be hearing a lot from me when we've all had a chance to play it. Until then, have a good day, and I'll see you in the next one.